Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Budget Committee of February 9th. Are there any regrets? I see none. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? I see none. Okay, members of committee, there is one consent item. Do I have somebody willing to move the consent item? Councillor Johnston. All those in favor? That's carried. Discussion item number 2 is the 6-line EA study funding increase. Members of staff, is there any need to provide any comments on this?
Mr. Chair, staff don't have a presentation, but we're certainly welcome to, or certainly prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Members of committee? I see none. Then is there a motion? Councillor Johnston has given the staff recommendation. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, on to item number 3, the main item of the day. Before I go into the details of that, any member of the public wishing to speak further regarding an issue on the 2012 Budget Committee agenda may appear before Council at its meeting on March 5th, 2012 at 7 p.m. when the recommendations from this meeting will go forward for final consideration. If you wish to speak as a delegation, please sign the sheet located at the back of the room or notify the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the Council meeting. Any PowerPoint presentations must also be forwarded to the Clerk's Department no later than noon the day of the meeting. So just to make sure everybody recognizes, this is going to March 5th, not the meeting next Monday. Mr. Lalonde, do you have some entering points that you wish to make?
Yes, I do. I'm just waiting for my presentation to come up. Okay, there will be, I guess, 3 parts to the presentation that we're going to make supporting this report. The first part will be a brief overview of the appendices that are provided to you in your report. Those will be provided by me, Commissioner Bloomer, and Commissioner Leonardo. And following that, Nancy Sully will make some concluding remarks to the budget and then put up a slide which you're all familiar with. It's the pluses and minuses spreadsheet, and we can work through that till you have concluded your deliberation. So the first appendix is Gerlach Gardens, and our recommendation for that report is that staff discuss relocation options with Oakville Galleries, and that a further report on the severance and sale of the main house be brought forward to Council in early 2013. There are a number of considerations associated with this. The house was designed as a dwelling, and it is not able to withstand the wear and tear of a municipal building. Maintenance scheduled for that house over the next 20 years is exceeding $1 million, which certainly exceeds the value of the house itself, aside from the historical designation. There's no legal impediment to pursuing this course of action. We've checked the agreements, and we are able to proceed if it is the will of Council. And there are some valuation issues to work through. So that's a highlight of that appendix, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions on this item? Councillor Demoff?
Since we had our last meeting, have any discussions happened with Oakville Galleries, and have you had any feedback from them at all?
No, I have. Oh, okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, actually, Dominic Leonardo and myself met with Matthew Highland yesterday, and he was aware of the request for the report, and we reviewed with him the contents.
Did he provide any kind of feedback at all initially, or was it more just
No,
an
actually, this was not a surprise to them. We've had discussions of this nature several times, probably over the last 6 to 8 months. I think this is something both town staff as well as the galleries group have come to recognize. As Gord said, it is a dwelling that's been used as a municipal building, and if you look at operating the collection that they do, the storage of the collection, it's not really a good facility for them either.
With the recommendation, would it be possible for it to be a further report on options, including severance and sale? Because we limit ourselves only to severance and sale there. If there was something else that might want to be considered? Is that a possibility?
Of course.
Any others? Okay, if you care to proceed with the next item.
Mr. Chair, as a potential crossing guard program reduction, staff has identified 22 out of 96 locations that no longer meet even 50% of the town's warrant threshold for a guard. As requested by Budget Committee and as shown in Table C on this slide, staff have indicated crossing guard reduction scenarios for locations meeting less than 50% of the warrants in increments of 10%. These create full-year annualized budget reduction options that range from anywhere from $39,000 to $176,000. The staff report itself lists all of these locations in Table B of Appendix A. Additionally, as requested by committee, staff are also presenting a draft policy or procedure for consideration that could be used for purposes of removing guards that are no longer warranted. The suggested process would use warrant information collected in 2 consecutive years, and if a location did not exceed 20% of the warrant threshold over those 2 years, the crossing guard would be removed automatically. And this at the end of the school year, and the affected schools and school boards would be so notified. Locations with warrants between 20 and 50% would continue to be monitored, but would not be removed without further authorization. The 2-year trend is suggested to avoid any anomalies created by construction or other short-term factors that may affect walking patterns to a school in one given year. Based on adopting this practice in principle, staff identify 4 locations that would be removed as of June 30th this year, and for an annualized budget reduction of $32,000. These four locations are shown on this slide as a subset of the Table B in Appendix A. And staff are here to answer any questions.
Councillor DeMoff?
Further to our conversation, I wonder if we could also, I'm probably the only person that's ever done this, but add Dorval and Rebecca to the locations, given that there's very little traffic that goes by there, and I think there's been issues with getting guards in that location for some time. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. In my conversations with Councillor DeMoff, I became aware that we have a crossing guard location at Dorval and Rebecca that is funded, but we have had extreme difficulty in putting a guard there. We have recruitment issues, and whenever we have to reallocate resources to cover guards locations that are more populated, typically it's the Dorval-Rebecca location that is sacrificed in favor of ensuring guards are placed in more busy spots. So our actual ability to man that location over the last few years has been very, very limited and does not occur on a regular basis. So it could certainly, without too much issue, be added to the reduction scenario.
I would be fine to add that if the other members of the committee were okay with that.
Any others? Councillor Elgar?
Thank you for your presentation. I guess when I look at the numbers, you're saying because you didn't do a survey last year for the warrants, then you're not going to, that's a kind of an anomaly, just leave that out altogether. Is that your plan? Because there's one in here at 10%, but because it wasn't done last year, you just leave it in, even though you're blowing away ones that are at 17%.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. Just with the lack of data, we didn't feel comfortable that we had a trend that we could speak to over a 2-year period of time. Obviously, that's one of those locations that would be monitored during this year, and if that trend that exists today existed next year or this coming year, we expect it would likely be up for automatic removal as part of the new policy.
I guess I'm thinking of the Lakeshore Road West and East Street. Like and you're saying because it was below 20, it was 18 last year and 17 this year. That's why you're taking it then. It has to be, your idea is 2 years in a row.
That's correct.
And that's the bottom line.
Well, that's the proposal. I mean, there's probably any number of permutations and combinations we could come up with as a policy, but this is something we think we can work with. It limits the immediate implications to the reduction in the guard complement, but it's something we can work with as we go forward, and locations such as that, you know, would obviously be monitored regularly, so we know as soon as we hit that 2-year trend below 20%, we wouldn't even need to come through and have a discussion like this. It would just be removed from the budget automatically.
With regard to crossing guards, how many new crossing guards will you be proposing to add due to where they're needed going forward?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we understand there is a new school that will be opening in September in the Palermo area of northwest Oakville. The school itself, the school board has not identified for us yet, but typically we don't find this information out till the spring about requests for new guards. Our best guess would suggest that likely there'll be 2 locations that they might be asking for in September of 2012. Our typical practice in previous years, because we usually don't have this information prior to the budget process being finalized, is we do institute the new guard locations as requested by the school board for the month of September to December. We absorb those fairly small costs in the operating budget for that year, and we then come back during the budget process for the following year to have those locations permanently adopted into the complement if they're warranted.
Appreciate, because you can see what's going to happen at the new school. So thank you so much. Thanks.
Councillor Demott?
If we are automatically removing crossing guard locations, is it going to be an issue to try and add crossing guard locations in the future? If we're taking it out of the budget, are you going to have to come back to us and it's going to look like we're trying to spend, well, we would be spending more money on crossing guards. So I don't want to get into maybe as part of your review when you're looking at a policy, I don't want it to become an issue where we're increasing the warrant in order to add new locations because we've removed that money from a crossing guard budget, because it's not a lot of money we're talking about. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it could potentially balance itself out. I mean, as we're preparing the new budget for the upcoming year, we would be theoretically removing money from the base budget because of automatically removing guards, but at the same time, we would be planning for adding guards. So it may be a net change of 0. It just avoids, I guess, having to go through the discomfort of having to debate whether a guard is warranted or not warranted.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what's been happening to date is we incrementally always grow without removing. And we had in the past done this on a number of occasions, though, where we removed some and brought others in. So,
Councillor Johnston?
Thank you. Are the school boards aware of this proposed policy?
No, that not at this point in time. We certainly will be informing them, assuming that it is adopted through the budget process. We will certainly be advising them and making them aware of especially the 4, maybe now 5 locations that will be planned to be removed. And I think in the context of the fact that they are continuing to ask for new locations that are probably more warranted than the ones that are being removed, they probably would understand the favorable nature of doing it this way.
Thank you.
Councillor Giddings?
Thank you. Quick question regarding Maple Grove, New Central, EJ. In terms of the warrant percentages, would those numbers reflect the revisions made to the schools based on the 211 warrants?
I will confirm through Mr. Scalera. I know the 2000, the right-hand column represents very current information. We just processed that information based on 2011, but I think Mr. Scalera could add to that discussion.
Good morning. Through you, Mr. Chair, can you sort of clarify which location you were referring to?
Well, certainly. Well, specifically Maple Grove, New Central, and EJ. They've revised the grades that attend the school.
I think staff are asking which crossing guard location, if you're able to help them with that.
Lynbrook, McDonald, Michael Terrace, Elmhurst, the ones in the vicinity of the schools?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, if I understand the question right, is through the, I guess, the school boundary revisions, are the surveys taken into, or do the surveys take that into account? Or do the latest data take that into account? So the surveys are done in the fall and in the spring. And so the survey results here are based on 2011 survey data. So depending on when the boundary changes are made, then that would be reflected then in the data. So I can't confirm when those boundary changes were made specific to the crossing guard locations identified in the survey.
But it would reflect the current school year in terms of, perfect.
Yes.
Further to that, we have an ongoing issue, daily phone calls about the inadequate HDSB facilities in terms of parking and pickups and drop-offs. And my concern is that for some of the one with particularly low percentages, we're going to end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy as you know, the HDSB tells us they're trying to have walking school buses and everything they're trying to do to relieve the pressures on parking on town roads, because they don't encourage them to park on the school property, that by deleting these, it's going to give them more information to say, and more support to say, well, you're removing the crossing guards, so you're encouraging people to drive to school, and that's my concern.
Through you, Mr.
I'm not sure
Chair.
if that's a fair question for our staff to answer.
Yeah, and it might be difficult for us to answer. I mean, I certainly can try to comment. I do sympathize with the position that Councillor Giddings is making, because I think there's maybe some counterintuitiveness to saying we are trying our best through our active transportation efforts to encourage walking to school, and at the same time looking at removing crossing guards. But I guess it comes down to that decision about, you know, how long do you keep a guard standing at a corner when basically there's very few children that are using the crossing today. Do we keep the person there for another 5 years till we get to a point where it warrants it? I don't think we'd ever say no to the school board if they are taking an initiative to suggest that they want to come up with a plan for improving the walking to school, and if they need a crossing guard to make that happen, I think we would work cooperatively as best we can to see that happen.
Thank you very much. I guess apologies for not having the question there. It's more out of frustration over the inabilities to get kids to school in a safe and, you know, in a safe manner, like walking. So further to Councillor Demoff's question, if they were successful in hitting those warrants in terms of getting more youth walking, I guess I share the concern that if the money has gone out of the budget, would we be able to react fairly quickly to put them in place if they met the warrants?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it would be similar to what we're currently doing when it comes to the addition of a new guard that is requested after the budget is approved. I mean, one guard in of itself is not a very difficult thing to try to absorb into the operating budget. I mean, if they were asking for 20 locations all at the same time, we probably would have a bit of a challenge, but I think we could deal with it on a case-by-case basis and, where necessary, potentially absorb some costs and then add it into the budget process in the upcoming year to follow.
Okay, any other questions on this matter? Okay, in the interim, while we're dealing with the other matters, could you please give us an estimate to update the 12.8 thousand for 5 locations? I presume it may be a mere...
It would probably be in the range of another $8,000 from the annualized budget.
Yeah.
But we can certainly reconfirm that.
That's exactly how I presumed it would work, but I'll let you give us the numbers and we'll go from there. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to the next item then.
Mr. Chair, the bulk leaf service reduction option is discussed in Appendix C of the staff report today. As summarized on this slide, the report breaks down the annual costs for spring and fall collections, and the fall service costs are further detailed based on the collection zones established in 2010, 2004, and prior to 2004. It is noted that the expansion zones added in 2004 and 10 represent 12% of the program cost, but only 5% of the collection volume. Due to the low volumes being collected and the disproportionate share of the cost, there is an option to consider removal of bulk leaf collection service for the expansion zones in 2012 for a budget reduction in the order of $85,000. These areas will still be serviced regularly by the region's bagged leaf and yard waste collection program in the spring, summer, and fall months.
Any questions? Okay, I think we're ready to keep moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were asked to provide you with some information on our mooring slips for both the Oakville and the Bronte Harbor compared to other marinas nearby. Now, in January 2011, Council approved the Oakville Harbor's financial strategic plan. That was completed in consultation with our stakeholders, who at that time supported the plan. As part of that plan, the mooring fees for Oakville Harbors would increase to the comparable market rate by the year 2016. So Table 1 and 2 on this slide really are extracts from the financial plan, and you can see that when we did the study last year, we started off with a comparative rate of $63.87, and then in 2016, if we made the assumption of increases of 3% each year, we would have to target our mooring slips at about $76.26 per foot, per linear foot of our slips. So the plan suggested, therefore, that Table 2 be implemented, and we would see increases of 5% in 2011, which we did, and we have billed 5.2% in 2012, and we're forecasting 5.2 to 2016, at which point that would achieve us the market rate. And then you can see for the rest of the 10-year forecast, we are being consistent with our comparators. In Table 3, we did a quick analysis this year. The actual rate for 2011 as a comparator was not 65.79 as we forecasted, but the actual rate was 69.27. And then when we did the 3% movement forward on that assumption in 2016, the new comparator rate would be $80.30. So that's what we were looking to move forward on. So based on that, you have we developed 3 options to be consistent with the original phase-in plan of the Harbor's facilities plan. The increases in option 1 would see an increase in 2013 to 2016 from roughly 5.2% to 6.5%, which would give us the 80 cents and 29 comparator rate. Council certainly has the option to change that to go to 2013 immediately to get the comparator rate. And if you go back to the previous slide, you'll see the comparator at 73.49 in 2013. Of course, the other option is 2014. Staff recommendation is that we pursue and continue with option 1. And we will continue to monitor the rates on a yearly basis and make the automatic adjustments as we move forward based on our comparators. Now, just for information, you do have in your package who our comparators are. They're Bronte Outer Harbor, the 2 marinas in Mississauga, and the LaSalle Marina in Burlington. Mr. Chairman, we were also asked about some information about vacancy rates for each of those marinas. You have those as part of attachments 1, 2, and 3. Our occupancy rate for the Oakville, both of the Oakville marinas are at 95%. The reason for this is that town has some vacant slips that cannot be used for those who are on the waiting list due to their size and that really don't match the available slip. Mr. Chairman, that is a brief overview of the Harbor's presentation.
Mayor Burton.
Thank you. So if council were to, option 1, I got confused when you talked about continuation. That's our existing policy?
That's correct.
Thank you. So thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we're ready to keep going.
Staff were asked to provide some comparative information on the City of Toronto's debt charges versus Oakville, as well as our projected transfers to reserves versus our depreciation. The response to this is included in Appendix B of the Budget Deliberations Report. As well, there was a separate report on today's agenda, the consent item, in response to Regulation 28409. In that report, we outlined that our budgeted transfers to reserves and capital used to fund our infrastructure renewal total $39.4 million. Our estimated 2012 depreciation expense is $39.5 million, so these two amounts now almost essentially match. The town has a policy of adding 1% to the tax levy each year for capital. This has provided an increased funding source for infrastructure renewal. As a result, we have not required any debt in our current long-term forecast for infrastructure renewal, as we have sufficient funding in our reserves and our capital transfers. We were also asked to compare information on the City of Toronto's debt charges versus the town of Oakville's. The City of Toronto is the only municipality in Ontario that does not have a provincially prescribed debt limit. As a result, they have an internal policy of limiting their debt to 15% of tax revenues. Based on information found on their website, their projected debt charges as a percentage of tax revenues is 11% for 2012. If we were to use the same policy, our debt charges would be 7.2% of tax revenues in 2012, based on our projected tax levy. It's important to note, though, that debt charges are the annual repayment of principal and interest and are based on the term that the debt is issued for. Further information on the City of Toronto's website indicates that they have now gone towards a policy of issuing debt for 30-year terms. This has reduced their annual debt charges to keep them below their 15% target. Oakville's debt, with the exception of Pine Glen Soccer Facility, is issued on 10-year terms. If we were to switch to 30-year terms similar to Toronto, our annual debt charges would decrease significantly, but it would further increase the cost over the time period. I don't know if there's any questions.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Before we move into the possible reduction options, I just wanted to provide a quick recap of the 2012 budget. We began the process in June with the release of the budget forecast. At that time, we were presenting an 8% tax levy increase. Staff spent several months developing and reviewing our program budgets. All program expenditures were reviewed, and any efficiencies and savings were taken in the base budget. As well, all our program revenues were reviewed, both for volume increases and fee increases required to maintain cost recoveries. This resulted in a reduction of $2.3 million from the estimated increase presented in June, bringing the tax levy increase down to 6.7%. As has been mentioned, we've had significant public consultation, beginning with our pre-consultation in November and December. 3 budget open houses were held. As well, for the first time, a live Twitter event was held with the mayor and the budget chair. And our public continued to take advantage of the budget emails. There have been questions raised regarding why the town's increase is 6.7% when inflation is around 3%. As staff, we wanted to respond to this. This chart was included in the budget discussion document and was in my presentation on January 16th and shows the breakdown of the 6.7% increase for the town. As you can see from the chart, our net inflationary increases are 3.4%. This is slightly above CPI. However, it takes into consideration the increase in OMERS rates. They were increased by 1% in 2012. This added $850,000 to our personnel budget for the employer share. As well, we had to account for a hydro rebasing. Oakville Hydro is mandated under legislation to implement the rebasing, which essentially shifts hydro costs from residential users to our street lighting budget. This added 0.3% to our base budget, bringing the total to 3.7% just to maintain our existing services. The budget includes $2.7 million in additional operating costs as a result of new facilities and infrastructure built as part of the capital budget, as well as new roads and infrastructure assumed as part of the development process. This includes our new Queen Elizabeth Park Community and Cultural Centre, a 144,000 square foot facility new to Oakville and providing much needed cultural and recreation space. Operating impacts from capital account for 2% of the 6.7% increase. New assessment growth of 1.15% helps to offset some of the cost of new growth, but it doesn't cover the total cost. This brings the base operating budget increase to 4.6%, higher than inflation, but it adds new facilities and infrastructure to meet the needs of a growing community. The final components of the increase relate to the funding for infrastructure renewal, as well as the town's contribution to growth-related capital required under development charge legislation. These components account for 2.1% of the tax levy increase. I should note that 0.9% of this is the tax shift from the region and does not increase the overall tax bill, as the region's tax increase went down by the same amount. 2.1% is a significant amount. Council invested in ensuring our infrastructure is maintained in a state of good repair. This funding ensures we have sufficient reserves to repair and replace our assets at the end of their useful life, and allows us to not issue debt for infrastructure renewal. We could choose to reduce the tax levy increase by not funding our infrastructure renewal, but this would just push out the burden to future taxpayers. This brings our total increase to 6.7% as proposed by staff. Again, the proposed budget maintains the services valued by our residents. The budget achieves the guideline of an overall increase in line with inflation without reductions to service levels and incorporates the operating cost of new facilities. In all of our budget documents, we have been very clear that the town's increase is 6.7% and the overall increase is 3%. It's the 3% increase or the overall increase that our residents will see on their tax bill and can be compared to municipalities like Toronto or Hamilton. The budget ensures the town continues to operate in a fiscally sustainable manner. It provides sufficient funding to maintain our programs and services as well as keep our assets in a state of good repair. It also doesn't rely on reserves or debt to keep our taxes artificially low. During 2012 and 13, our CAO has committed to undertaking service delivery reviews to ensure we continue to deliver services as efficiently and effectively as possible. These reviews will build upon the town's performance-based, program-based budgeting to assess our outcomes against program goals and identify potential spending reductions. The 2013 and 14 forecast assumes permanent reductions to expenditures of $750,000 to be found through these reviews. This slide might be a little bit hard to read, but this is the list of potential reduction options that were presented to the Budget Committee on January the 19th. And in total, they total $300,000 if all were taken in 2012, and an annualized impact of $624,000. I'll now switch over to the spreadsheet that you've seen in past years so that we can determine what to do.
Members of committee, I just want to make sure that that you all did receive the letter from the Oakville Arts Council as well. Okay.
I don't mean to sound like a broken record on this, but as long as we keep saying 6.7%, residents will never understand that that's broken down into two components. And I do understand where it comes from, and I know everyone in this room does, but I don't know that the public understands that our base budget is increasing by 4.6%, which sounds and is a lot better than 6.7. And the other things are things that if we cut out, we would be costing the taxpayer in the long run. So it goes back to what the Chamber said when they were here about messaging, and I think it would be great if we could do a better job of saying that town portion of base operating and budget increase is held to 4.6%, and then break down that we are investing in our capital or in our infrastructure and our roads as in addition to that. And I don't know whether that messaging can go out there, but I think as long as we continue to say 6.7%, and then put the explanation afterwards, people won't understand what's involved in that. So I don't know if you can take that away in terms of messaging with the budget, but I think it's really important for people to understand how proactive we're being on this, and that it's not part of the base operating budget that's going up by that additional 2.1%. That's a comment more than a question, so if you can take that away,
Certainly.
I'd appreciate that. And I guess my question to Councillor Adams is where I would deal with the two items that I have here.
We will add them on as additional items. When we get to, if you look in your agenda, in the agenda piece, Part 3 has a set of recommendations. And then if you go to Appendix G on page 43 of your agenda, there is a more detailed recommendation around the specific dollar items, and it's got 1, 2, 3, 4 there. So, for example, the TA Blakelock one, that would be one that I think we want to just give direction to as a item 8 in effect from the first page. I mean, we'll add it on as a new piece. So, what we've got here on the spreadsheet are the numbers that ultimately will be used to fill in the grade in sections of page 43. Okay, and the transit item, and so we'll have to. That would be an item that would be like a part 1B on page 43, for example. So, but I would suggest that, I mean, because it's an item that would want to show up here, you'd have to have an estimate to put in here. But if you're just asking for a report, then it's not really a part 1B. It's an item 5 or something on page 43. Okay, understand? Is that process okay for you? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much for your presentation. A couple of questions. You brought up about debt charges, 10% versus, or amortized over 10 years rather than 30 years. And we have got people now, because of this big, everybody is thinking in very short term, little increments, forgetting the long term. And if we want to look like heroes, we could probably change the budget percentage quite a bit by moving to a 30-year amortization, which I'm not saying it's good. I'm just thinking it's time we get people to be aware of what, in fact, decisions we have made as a town council, as opposed to those that have been made in other jurisdictions. Do we have any idea what the difference would be if we moved to a 30-year over from a 10-year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, I don't. We'd have to go back and look at when the debt was issued and what the rates were at that time. Going forward, if you were to take on a policy like that, the issue becomes as well, we issue our debt through the region. There would have to be a market for the 30-year debt, and you'd have to look at what the cost of that is by going to a 30-year term, because there would be an increased financing cost.
I agree it would be an increased financing cost, but it would be an awful lot lower on the backs of the residents on an annual basis, even in the short term.
That's correct, it would.
Back in 2004, the Director of Finance presented to the Council a picture that was extremely bleak of how we were gapping our gap as far as not putting money in the pot for infrastructure. Do you have a copy of that we could present so that people can see what we have done in the last few years to turn that completely around, so that in fact we actually do repair the roads that which showed that we were going absolutely the wrong way? Do you have that available?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can find that for you.
I think when it comes to, because not all the councillors were here at the time, I think it'd be a good lesson in history of decisions that were made based on decisions that have been made years ago that may not have been so sustainable. When you look at how we didn't have the money at all to fix our infrastructure, I would appreciate that.
Certainly.
And thank you very much for what you do.
Maybe we can get that slide and make sure we have it for March 5th.
Certainly.
Okay. Mayor Burton?
Isn't it true that with debt as low as ours, that the impact of shifting from 10-year to 30-year would not be really all that perceptible to the actual tax rate change?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's probably correct. Our debt is fairly low. We haven't been issuing a lot of debt. We've been very careful with our debt. If it's required, if there's a strategic reason to use it, we do. There's no debt in the forecast, so you're correct. It wouldn't make that much of a difference. In the City of Toronto, it makes quite a difference because they have a very large amount of outstanding debt.
Thank you for that.
Councillor Demoff?
How much debt do we have?
I believe the outstanding balance is projected at $63 million. That includes both tax-supported and self-supported debt.
Because if you just take $50 million at 5%, the difference between 10 and 30-year amortization, you cut it almost in half. So it goes from 6.3 to 3.2 million. So I know that it's not that easy, but it is fairly significant in an annual amount. I just was curious what we had.
Well, I think you have to take into account what's tax supported. The tax supported amount is really small. It's projected to go under 17 million this year. So by the time you cut out all the debt that's supported by others, not us, the savings you would get on an annualized basis are really quite small, I think. And to the previous discussion, you end up paying more for it over time anyway. So. Are any other questions of our staff? Okay, I think we've dealt with all of the items. Is there any further information you want to give us before we deal with the spreadsheet and the other items that members wish to bring forward?
No, that concludes the staff presentations.
Okay, then members of committee, I want to make sure that you all have the same thing in front of you as I have. On page 9 of your agenda, if I can draw your attention to that, please. You have the recommendations listed as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then on page 43, you have Appendix G, which again, perhaps unfortunately, are listed as 1, 2, 3, 4 to make the world a little bit more confusing. And so what I would like to do is I think the simplest thing would be to deal with the bits and pieces as we go down this list on the spreadsheet in front of us. These are the items that are changing the tax impact, or the town tax and the overall tax bill. There are a list here, and we also have, as I said, on page 9 and 10, a number of particular items, only some of which ultimately change the tax rate. So could we have somebody move a list here? Mayor Burton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For convenience and efficiency, I'd like to give you a motion with 7 parts. And although I've written it out, it is in my famous handwriting, so I may best read it. That the Budget Committee receive the reports and information presented at the meeting and recommend to Council, number 1, to change the employee survey to a 4-year cycle. Number 2, that the staff options presented to adjust ICE operations be approved. Number 3, that the Garlock option be amended, as amended, be approved. Number 4, that the transit changes be approved as presented. Number 5, that the crossing guard policy be approved as presented and the Dorval Rebecca crossing guard service be removed, if I understood that correctly. Number 6, that the retrofit project at the Pine Glen soccer facility proceed in 2012 and the necessary amendment to the funding agreement with the OCS, the Oakville Soccer, the OSC, the Oakville Soccer Club, be approved with no impact on the levy. Number 7, so number 6, that the retrofit project at the Pine Glen soccer facility proceed in 2012 and the necessary amendment to the funding agreement with the OSC be approved with no impact on the levy. Number 7, that the report on harbor boat slip fee adjustments to reach market rates be referred to staff for public consultation and subsequent further consideration by the 2013 Budget Committee. And in the meantime, we continue the existing policy. And that's all I got.
Okay, could we, on our spreadsheet so everyone sees it, add minus 20,000 to D39, add the 27,500 there? I understood that to be part of your motion, Mayor Burton? Yes. Yeah, minus 79,000 in the transit, nothing there. The school crossing guards, the original number was 12.8, and I guess we need to add 1 quarter more, so that probably becomes 16.1. Would that be the right estimate?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think if you use the 16,000 as a round number for 2012 reduction, that would annualize itself to $40,000.
Very good. And those, I believe, are the only items that change the tax rate.
So I have a question about that item.
Okay, Mayor Burton.
What's the, could somebody please explain the $89,000 figure?
I believe that's if you took all 22 or 28 of the crossing guards that were originally noted, rather than using the over 2-year period. So there was one estimate given to us based on if you don't meet 50% compliance, and that listed out the 28 guards, I think, sorry.
So how many guards are we?
This is for 5 guards. The 16,000 is the estimate for the 5 guards.
So we're only removing 5, not 28.
That's correct. And what it'll mean is that in the 2013 budget cycle, there'll be an additional 24,000. So on an annualized basis, the 16 becomes 40.
I'm laboring the point so that we hopefully don't wind up with any members of the public thinking we've reduced 28.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe those are all the items that impact here. There is on line 38 the issue of the survey. There's no change to this year's budget. It will affect a future year budget. And so, could we, it'll be within the wording of the motion, but it doesn't show up on our spreadsheet, I guess, unless you want to put a 0 in there.
That's correct. We'll put it in the wording of the motion.
Okay. Okay, so we've dealt our, so Mayor Burton, are you also satisfied with respect to the terminology that's used on page 9 for the Appendix A crossing guards? And where it reads in Appendix A, Item 2, that based on adoption of this policy and principle commencing September 2012, the 4 crossing guard locations, we're using that, but you want to add 5 crossing guards and add the Dorval Rebecca?
I'm fine with however it wants to be wordsmithed. It's the outcome that
you're trying to get. Okay, so let's just make sure that we, for ease of the clerk's life here, that we make sure that everybody knows what we're doing. So we've got on page 9 that council approve a new policy and principle such that the annual operating budget be removed for any crossing guard location that does not exceed at least 20% of the approved warrant threshold criteria for 2 consecutive years, and B, any crossing guard location that only meets between 20 and 50% of the approved warrant threshold criteria be placed on a list to assess ongoing trends and be subject to future removal with council approval. That based on adoption of this policy and principle commencing in September 2012, the 5 crossing guard locations currently located at Chartwell Road and Michael Terrace, McDonald Road and Gloucester Avenue, 3rd Line and Hickson, and Lakeshore Road and East Street, and Dorval and Rebecca be removed for a 2012 budget reduction of $16,000. If you can change that. Annualized to a full year budget reduction of $40,000. and that the affected schools and school boards be so notified in advance during the current school year, and that staff report back during 2012 with the details of a formal policy for council's final approval. Appendix B, that the information contained in Appendix B be received. Now, item 5 here, you've modified, I believe, that staff enter into discussions with Oakville Galleries on the potential relocation of the galleries, and that a further report be brought forward to council on the potential timing of the severance and sale of the main house. Has that changed, or are you comfortable with that?
Councillor?
To word it so that it's options including severance and sale of the main house.
That's what
So
I
we're
meant
not
when I said
limiting-
as amended.
Yeah.
I was accepting the councillor's suggestion.
On options including the potential timing of the severance and sale of the main house, is that, did I? Yeah, on options including,
So options including is inserted after council on.
Yeah.
And before the potential.
council, to council, options including the potential sale, or potential timing of the severance and sale of the main house, okay? Appendix D, item 6 here. Mayor, am I correct in my understanding you wish to proceed with this, option 1?
I want to proceed with option 1, which is status quo, and I want to refer the report to staff to consult with the public to bring back the matter for further consideration at the next budget committee.
Okay, so we're not, you don't wish to pass this, you wish to pass a different thing, which is as you stated. Sorry, you don't wish to, on page 10, there's a recommendation. You don't wish to pass that, you wish to pass a motion that says that fees continue as previously approved.
As I understand it, option 1 is continuing the status quo. That's what staff told me.
Right, but there's...
So I'm happy to move, I'm happy for my language to read exactly as it does there.
Yeah.
Plus, and that the report, the report has other options in it?
Yeah.
Be referred back to staff for public consultation and future consideration by the next, by the 2013 Budget Committee.
Yeah. Okay. Item 7 is being ignored. So we're dropping, just to be clear, we're dropping 7.
There may be support for it, but I don't have any, so I didn't include it in my motion.
But the motion on the floor excludes it. And then, if we go to page 43, please. So this will be, item 1 becomes the new item 7. That the 2012 recommended operating and capital budgets as presented in the 2012 operating budget and the 2013 to 2014 forecast budget document be approved subject to the following adjustments. A, that the 2012 capital budget be amended to include the purchase of the post office building and closing costs totaling $11.2 million, to be financed $4.6 million from the parking reserve fund and $6.6 million from the capital reserves, and that the contribution from the capital reserve be repaid through future parking revenues. Then for B, if we could insert the terminology that we've got in B39, and then we need to include B41 on the Excel sheet here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get terminology to that staff will be comfortable with respect to the options that are on the spreadsheet in cell number B39, B41, B42.
Maybe it'd be best to label them A, B, C, D. Would that help the clerk? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that would be great. Could you do that for us, please?
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't realize you were talking about spreadsheet cell numbers.
Sorry, I'm going into Excel. That's the engineer coming out in me. What can I say?
Oops, sorry.
Well,
this is the wrong
we
one.
appreciate that.
No,
We just
sorry.
had trouble catching up.
C and D.
And I think we want to also include line 38, the citizen employee engagement survey line. So we want that to happen even though it doesn't do anything to the budget this year.
Well, I'm out of order, but
Out of order,
just make
but
sure I
A, B,
have the
C, D,
right, I just want to make sure I have the right line, so I'm not doing something wrong. Okay, that's
yes, you
fine.
have the right lines. So can we just talk in options A, B, C, D, E, and we'll get wording incorporated after? Okay. And I know there's some amendments that you want to add, so we'll come back. Oh, okay, what's the item about the crossing
Could
guard?
we just change that to say remove 5 guard locations meeting less than 20% of the warrants, just so that it's really clear on the spreadsheet what it is we're doing?
And to that point, it's not meeting less than 50%, it's per the staff report. Yeah, well, okay, we'll deal with these nitty gritty bits, but there are a couple of other items that we want to add. We need to, so the numbers in here, the levy request number is the number that ultimately shows up at the bottom of the sheet. So that'll fill in item 2 in the on page 43, and the be approved resulting in A, and we get 2.93%. 6.55 for the town, approximately 2.93% overall residential tax increase. Items 3 and 4 stand as is. Mayor Burton, you're moving those?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the, so that's 8, 9, and 10. Item 11 is the item dealing with the Oakville Soccer Club. So for the clerk, 7, 8, 9, 10. New number 11 is the soccer club. Come, okay. And okay, so those are all the items. We'll clean up the terminology here in a brief recess. Are there any other amendments that anybody wishes to bring forward? Councillor Demoff?
I've got 2, actually. I had circulated this morning something about offering a Looney Tuesday on our Oakville transit system, but on reflection and discussion with staff, I wondered if I could change that staff report back on options to be considered to promote Oakville transit use in conjunction with the introduction of the intelligent transportation system.
Okay.
And
And I presume this is just a report back. There's no funding requirement to this.
that's correct. There's no funding required.
It's a subsequent item.
Well, it can be dealt with as an add-on or as a subsequent item, either way. And the second one?
The second one was that the request from TA Blakelock be reviewed by staff as part of the Parks and Rec Master Plan and 10-year capital forecast.
Okay. Does staff have any concerns about those 2 new items that I'm calling items 12 and 13? One being the, I didn't quite get all the terminology. I'll come to you, Mayor Burton, in just a minute, about the marketing of transit, and the other, number 13, being the TA Blakelock item. Okay, staff are okay with those. Mayor Burton?
They're fine ideas. I just don't see them as amendments to the main motion properly. These are freestanding, independent future suggestions, and I believe procedurally they ought to be treated that way.
I'm going to let them stand as items. If the committee wishes to vote them down and reintroduce them as separate, I'll call it new business, then that's okay too. I think at the end of the day, you get to the same place. So, okay, I'm going to, before we go into debate on the 13 items, and the various options A through E, I'm going to ask for us to take a 5-minute recess just to make sure we get the terminology right, and then we'll come back and have our discussion. Do all members of committee have the revised pieces of paper? The only change is in item 11, the additional words "and the capital budget reflect the change in 2012" have been added. In item 11, look on the screen. There's an additional phrase at the very end that reads, "and the capital budget reflect the change in 2012." Okay. Members of committee, I think you all have it in front of you now. Are there any questions? Are we all good with this? Okay. Are there any speakers to the motion? Any separations? Oh, Councillor Demoff, you wish to worry about item 12. Your comments, please?
It just doesn't make sense that that staff report back to promote. Shouldn't it be with options to promote?
Can we reflect that, please? Add the words "with options to promote transit use in conjunction with the introduction of the intelligent," is it intelligent transportation system? Is that? Okay.
No, intelligent.
Thank you. Okay, intelligent. That's what I thought. Okay.
That's right the way it is.
Any others? Any other last minute catches here? Going once, going twice, sold? Okay, any speakers? Then if I may, Councillor Demoff?
With regard to the boating fees, since I've been on council, we spent a year talking about what the fees would be for various options. I'm just wondering why we want to reopen that dialogue.
To whom are you asking?
It's directed to the mayor because I think he was the one that had asked for it. But option 1 is the one that was recommended by the staff, which council approved. I'm just wondering why we're reopening the whole dialogue.
Mayor Burton, do you wish to speak to that?
I wanted the staff to consult with the community about the other options, and I wanted the Budget Committee of 2013 to be able to consider taking those. If you're unhappy with it, you could separate it and defeat it.
It just seems like we've had quite a lot of consultation and dialogue on it. So I think I would like to separate that one, actually.
Okay, we can do that. Then I will call that one immediately. If there are no other speakers, could I get a show of hands, all those for option item 6 as presented? Those against? Okay, thank you. Any other separations? Okay, then could we have a show of hands, all those in favor of the remaining 12 items? All those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very, very much, everybody. This has been a very long process. It started long ago last year, and it's never stopped. We've had an amazing amount of consultation with the public, user groups, internal staff, a whole variety of individuals. We've had hundreds of people who have provided us their comments through the pre-budget consultations that we held last year, as well as through the process we've had early in 2012. The budget that we've just recommended to council, which will come on March 5th, it continues all the services and programs that we've come to enjoy in Oakville that serve all of our residents. We've got no major cuts here like we've seen in other places. There's no huge debt being added on just to keep the lights on and keep our infrastructure going. We have a long-term financial plan that's very satisfactory. in terms of managing our debt loads and pushing them down. The tax-supported debt is continues to be heading downwards. These are all good things for Oakville, and I think we should all be proud about it. We also have kept with our in line with inflation targets, and we've got the same thing coming for 2013 and 2014. The town share in 13-14 are projected to be smaller, so I think we're in a good place for the next couple of years as well. So congratulations, everybody. Councillor Demoff.
I'd just like to thank you, Councillor Adams, for all your work on this, and I know you've spent countless hours on it, and I appreciate you thanking everyone else, but I think you deserve a lot of thanks for what we've done as well.
Thank you very much. Then with that, I'm going to adjourn, and thank you, everybody. And there's one other group of people that do need our thanks, and it's all these people in front of us here. They've worked very, very hard from the very beginning in doing the background work that's required to put all those giant books together for us. And I know Nancy's been working with her staff very diligently to make sure that all the directors throughout our organization understand what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes I think they feel like they're the bad guys because they're always going around saying you can't have this, you can't have that. But they do a very good job of communicating that internally, and I think we owe them our thanks to make sure that that continues happening in future years as well. Thank you, guys.